Imagine being in a battle without having super cool fighting skills like a warrior. It's not fun at all, especially if you're just a merchant trying to make a living. These merchants are actually heroes, because they want to help the brave adventurers who are risking their lives to win the game. They work behind the scenes to support the fighters. I have to admit, I've always secretly admired merchants and crafters. They're like the unsung heroes of the game. But the shopkeeper standing in front of me was totally different. He was a pawnbroker named Agile, and he didn't seem to care about anyone but himself. He was trying to make a deal with a spearman, and he wasn't being very nice about it. Deal, I'll give you 500 coal for 20 dusk lizard hides, Agile said with a big smile. Then he slammed his meaty arm down on the spearman's shoulder, making him jump. Agile sprang into action, opening the trading window and typing in the amount of gold he was offering. The seller still looked unsure, but Agile's intense stare changed his mind fast. As a merchant and a skilled axe warrior, Agile could be pretty intimidating. The seller quickly added his items to the trade and clicked accept. Thanks for shopping with me. Come back soon, Agile joked, giving the man a friendly slap on the back as he walked away. I was amazed by the deal Agile had just made. Dusk lizard hide is super valuable for making armor, and we got a ton of it for just 500 coal. It seemed like a total steal. I kept quiet and watched as the seller trudged off, wondering how Agile had managed to negotiate such an awesome price. I thought to myself, note to self, never trust a second-hand buyer. I walked up to Agile, a guy with a shiny bald head, and teased him. Hey Agile, another day of ripping off good people. He turned around, flashing me a big smile. What's up, Kirito? My motto is simple, buy cheap, sell cheap. Yeah, right? I wasn't buying it. I had some more stuff to get rid of, so I said, I've got some new items to sell you. Agile loved doing business with me, because he knew I was a regular customer. He leaned in to check out what I had for sale, looking at the trade window on my avatar. In the virtual world of Sword Art Online, our avatars look just like us, same face, same body. That's because the nerve gear scanners and setup process made sure we were identical in the game. I had to give Agile credit, he looked exactly like the tough guy he was supposed to be in the game. He was super tall and muscular, with a face that resembled a rock. His bald head made him look even tougher. But when he smiled, his mean scowl turned into a friendly grin that made you feel at ease. Agile seemed like he was in his late 20s, but it was hard to guess what he did in real life. In Sessazua, we didn't talk about our lives outside the game. It was just something we didn't do. When Agile saw what I had to trade, his eyes widened in surprise. Whoa, hold up, that's an S-rank item, he exclaimed. I was talking about ragout rabbit meat, which is super rare. I've never even seen one before. The person I was talking to asked if I was desperate for cash, and if I had thought about eating it myself. Yeah, I have thought about it, I said, but it's hard to find someone who can cook it really well. Just then someone poked me on the shoulder from behind. Kirito, a woman's voice said. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. There's only one female player who calls me by my name. I quickly grabbed her hand and spun around. Looks like I caught myself a chef, I exclaimed. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean? She stuttered, trying to pull her hand away. But I held on tight. She was really cute, with a small face and long brown hair that framed it perfectly. Her hazel eyes sparkled like they were shining just for me. Meet Asuna. She's a total rock star in the game. She has a tiny nose and bright pink lips that curve into a cool smile. Her uniform is awesome too. It's red and white, just like a knight's, and she wears a sleek silver sword at her side. Asuna is famous inside the game, and there are lots of reasons why. For one thing, she's really pretty main. In a game where not many girls play, that makes her stand out. The game is super realistic, so it shows what players really look like. And let's be honest, it's not every day you meet a girl in the game who's as cool and gorgeous as Asuna. Imagine being one of the coolest players in a super popular online game. Asuna was just that, an amazing gamer with stunning looks to match. Her awesome outfit with its white and crimson colors was instantly recognizable as the uniform of the Knights of the Blood, or Kobe for short. This guild was like a dream team, made up of 30 incredibly talented players who were all masters with a sword. Asuna was more than just a pretty face though. She was the vice commander of the Kobe and had earned the nickname The Flash due to her lightning-quick skills with a rapier. People thought her guild leader was the most powerful player in the entire game. Sword Art Online SAO, with over 6,000 players competing. Asuna stood out as one of the very best both for her looks and her gaming abilities. She was truly unbeatable. It's no surprise that she was super famous. Lots of people loved her, but some took it way too far. They were totally obsessed. Others, on the other hand, couldn't stand her. It couldn't have been easy being in her shoes. Most people wouldn't dare challenge one of the best gamers around, but her guild wanted to keep her safe. That's why she always had bodyguards with her. 2 guys in shiny armor and white capes stood a few steps behind her, keeping a close eye on things. The skinny guy with long hair pulled back was glaring at me like I'd done something wrong. Probably because I was holding Asuna's hand, I let go and gave him a sarcastic wave instead. Then I turned back to answer Asuna's question. I ran into Asuna at a pretty rough-looking shop. What brings you to a dump like this? I asked her. The guy with long hair didn't like my question, and the shopkeeper got upset too. I could see the veins popping out on their foreheads. But then Asuna smiled and said hi to the guy. Agile, and his frown turned into a big goofy grin. She turned back to me, looking kind of annoyed. What's with the attitude? She asked. We're about to fight a tough boss, so I just wanted to make sure you're still alive. I chuckled. You can check my status anytime, since we're friends, I said. And let's be real, you only came here because you used your map to track me down. Asuna turned away, looking huffy and not very happy with me. Here's the rewritten text. Asuna was kind of a big deal in the game, even though she wasn't the leader of her guild. One of her jobs was to gather players like me for big battles against tough bosses, but it seemed crazy that she would personally come check on me. Asuna stood with her hands on her hips and her chin out, looking at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Listen, what matters is that you're okay, she said. Then she changed the subject. And what's this about a chef? I remembered that Asuna had been practicing her cooking skill in her free time, when she wasn't busy fighting. Hey, how's your cooking coming along? I asked her. She couldn't help but smirk. Are you ready for this? I nailed it last week. I was shocked. What? I thought to myself, this is crazy. Here's the thing, the more you use a skill, the better you get at it. But it takes forever to master. We're talking glacial pace. You have to get your skill level all the way up to 1000 to truly own it. And that's different from leveling up your character, which happens when you earn experience points. When you level up, you get more health, strength, agility and space for new skills. Right now, I had 12 spots available for skills, but I'd only mastered 3. Using a one-handed sword, searching for stuff, and defending myself with a weapon. Asuna had spent a crazy amount of time learning how to cook, but it wasn't like she could use it to fight monsters or anything. Hey, can you help me out? I asked, waving her over. I made my screen visible, so she could see what I was looking at. At first she looked skeptical, but then her eyes went wide with excitement. Whoa, is that a super rare ingredient? She asked. I made her an offer. If you cook this for me, I'll give you a bite. But before I could even finish talking, Asuna grabbed my shirt and pulled my face down close to hers. Half, she demanded, her eyes sparkling with determination. I was taken aback by how intense she was being, but I nodded my head in agreement without even thinking about it. Here's what happened. I made a mistake, and before I knew it, this girl was already celebrating with a big fist pump. I thought to myself, okay, it was worth it just to see her happy face up close. But then I had to break the news to my friend Agile. I closed the window and turned to him. Sorry, dude. The deal is off. Agile wasn't giving up easily. Come on. We're friends, right? Can't you just let me have a little bit? But I was firm. I'll write you a super long review instead, I said. Agile was totally dramatic about it. You can't do this to me, he cried, like the world was ending. I ignored him and turned away. That's when Asuna grabbed my coat sleeve. I'll cook for you, but where are we gonna do it? She asked. Good question. To cook something you need a few basic things, ingredients, utensils, and some way to heat it up, like an oven or stove. I hadn't thought that far ahead. To be honest, I did have some basic supplies at home, but let's just say it wasn't exactly the Ritz. As the vice commander of the Kobe, Asuna deserved way better than my messy place. She raised an eyebrow at me as I stuttered around like a fool. I'm guessing you don't have what you need to get started, she said with a sigh. But then she surprised me by offering. If your ingredients are really that good, You can use my room instead. My brain took a moment to catch up. Was she seriously inviting me to use her space? Asuna turned to the two guards who were with her, and said, I'm going to teleport to Selmberg now. I won't need you guys for the rest of the day. Fine, you can go. The man with long hair suddenly shouted, like he had been holding in his anger for a really long time. His face turned red, and if the video game's graphics were better, you could have seen veins bulging out of his forehead. Lady Asuna, it's already not a good idea that you're hanging out in this rough part of town, he said, waving his arms wildly, but bringing someone suspicious like him into your home. No way. I cringed at how over the top he was being. Who calls her Lady Asuna, anyway? It sounded like something an obsessed fan would say. Asuna looked just as annoyed as I was. The man's name was Karadale, and Asuna stood up to him. Just because you don't like him doesn't mean he's not a great fighter, she said. He's probably way stronger than you, with at least 10 more levels under his belt. Karadale's face turned bright red as he shouted back, that's impossible. I'm not weaker than. His high-pitched voice echoed off the walls of the alley, making us all wince. The guy's creepy eyes locked onto mine, and then they went wide with understanding. I've got it. You're a beater, right? He accused. A beater is a pretty nasty term that only exists in the world of Cello. It's a mix of beta tester and cheater, and it always stings when I hear it. I remembered the first person who ever called me that to my face, someone I used to think was a friend. I just shrugged and said, yeah, that's right, but the guy didn't let up. He kept going, his voice getting louder and more intense. Lady Asuna, don't trust him. He only looks out for himself. You can't expect anything good to come from hanging out with someone like him. Asuna had been calm until then, but now her eyebrows scrunched together in annoyance. The crowd around us was getting bigger by the second. I could hear people whispering about Koba and Asuna. She noticed everyone staring and turned to face Karadale, who still looked totally shaken. I told you to leave, she said firmly. Her voice low and serious. That's an order from your vice commander. She grabbed the back of my coat and started pulling me away. Let's go, she said, tugging us toward the main square. Wait, are you sure this is a good idea? I asked, hesitating. But she just said, I'm positive. Who was I to argue with her? We left the two guards and poor Egel, who looked really disappointed, and disappeared into the crowd. I glanced back one last time before we were swept up in the sea of people. I couldn't shake the image of Karadale's angry face from my mind. It was like it was burned into my brain. After that we arrived in Selmberg, a really cool castle town on the 61st floor. The town itself wasn't huge, but it was super pretty. A big old castle with tall, thin towers stood out in the middle of town, surrounded by buildings made of white granite and lots of green plants. It was like a perfect little village. They even had a great selection of shops, which made a lot of players want to live there. But it came with a hefty price tag, at least 3 times more expensive than living in Algade. Only the strongest players could afford it. As we teleported into town, the sun was setting, casting a purple glow over everything. Selmberg is actually on a small island, surrounded by lakes that cover most of the 61st floor. It's a really unique and beautiful place. We got there just as the last bits of sunlight were fading away, and it was an amazing sight to see. Imagine walking into a scene that's so amazing. It could be a painting. The sun was shining through the big opening of Aincrad, casting a glow across the lake. The dark blue water sparkled like diamonds against the red sky. It was truly breathtaking. I felt like I was under a spell, and I couldn't look away. But then I remembered that this incredible view was created by a powerful computer chip inside the nerve gear. It's like magic, but it's not really magic at all. As I explored Selmberg, I stumbled upon the teleport gate in the town square, right in front of an old castle. The main street stretched out to the south, lined with trees that had big leafy branches. The shops and houses along the street were a mix of cute and fancy, and the people walking around, both players and computer-controlled characters, seemed really classy. They carried themselves with confidence and style, making Selmberg feel like a really special place. As I stepped out into the open air, I felt like I could breathe again. It was totally different from the crowded streets of Algade. I stretched my arms up high and took a deep breath. Wow, it's so big and spacious here. It feels amazing. My friend looked at me with a hint of a smile. You should move here. Then, I laughed and shook my head. I wish, but I don't have enough money for that. I looked at her with concern. Seriously, are you sure your parents won't get upset about this? Asuna looked down, kicking at the ground with her boot. To be honest, I've had some bad experiences when I'm alone, she said quietly. But having a personal guard all the time is just too much. I keep telling them I don't need it. But they won't listen. They say it's guild rules. She sighed and continued, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't always like this. Our guild used to be small and simple. Here's the rewritten text. Our guild leader handpicked each member himself. But over time we've grown and changed. People join and leave all the time. Things got really wild when others started calling us the most powerful guild around. Asuna stopped talking and turned to face me, her eyes sparkling with a desperate plea for help. My breath caught in my throat, and I knew I had to say something. But as someone who only looked out for myself, what could I possibly say? The silence between us stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, Asuna broke the silence, looking away from me and gazing out at the deep blue lake. Her voice was higher and more cheerful now, like she was trying to shake off the serious mood. It's no big deal, really, she said. We should get going before it gets dark. I fell into step behind her. As we walked through the town, lots of players passed by us, but none of them did a double take at Asuna's face. I had visited this place, Selmberg, about 6 months ago when it was the farthest point we'd reached in the game. But back then, I didn't have time to stop and smell the roses. Now, I got to really look around and appreciate how cool it is here. The town has some amazing sculptures on display, and for a second, I thought it would be awesome to live in Selmberg forever. But then I realized it's better as a vacation spot, somewhere you can visit and have fun but not stay all the time. Asuna's home was super cute, located on the 3rd floor of a little house just off the main street. I stood outside Asuna's virtual house, feeling a little nervous. We had only talked during big battles, planning how to beat tough bosses together. I had never hung out with her one-on-one before, not even for a meal at a game restaurant. Hey, are you sure it's cool that I'm coming over? I asked. Asuna turned to me and smiled slightly. You're the one who invited yourself, right? And we need to cook somewhere. She headed up the stairs and I followed her. When we got to the top, I called out, sorry to barge in. But when I walked through the door, my jaw dropped. Asuna's place was super neat and organized. It looked like a totally different world from the messy places I'd seen in the game before. As I walked into the living room, I was blown away by how cool it looked. The walls were surrounded by light-colored wooden furniture that matched perfectly with the moss green decorations. It all seemed super high quality, and probably custom-made by other players who knew what they were doing. What really stood out though was how cozy and welcoming the whole space felt. There weren't any fancy or over-the-top decorations, which made it feel like a place where you could actually hang out and relax. My own place couldn't have been more different. It's basically a mess. I was glad I hadn't invited her over to my lair. I turned to her and asked, wow, how much did all of this cost? She thought for a moment before answering. I think it was around 4 million gold pieces for the room, and all the furniture together. Then she smiled and said, make yourself at home, sit wherever you like. I'm just gonna go change into something else. With that, she walked through a door on the other side of the living room, leaving me to check out her awesome space. In the world of Sassoeo, we used shortcuts to talk about big numbers. For example, min meant 1,000,000 and k meant 1,000. I'd been on so many adventures that I'd probably earned about 1,000,000 coins by now. But, to be honest, I loved buying new swords and cool gear, so saving up that much money was never going to happen. As I sat back into a super comfy couch, I took a moment to think about my spending habits. Just then, Asuna came out of the back room looking awesome in a simple white outfit. It's pretty cool how changing clothes works in SOA. You don't have to actually put them on or take them off. You just drag the new clothes onto your character's picture in the equipment menu, and voila, you're wearing something new. Here's the rewritten text. Something weird happened during our game. For a few seconds, some players were left wearing just their underwear. Because of this, the girls didn't want to change clothes in front of everyone. But the guys didn't seem to care. It's funny, because we're just computer characters made up of codes and numbers. Yet, after spending 2 years in this virtual world, it starts to feel real. When Asuna's clothes glitched out, I couldn't help but notice her bare skin. She caught me staring and gave me a look. How long are you gonna keep wearing that armor? She asked. I quickly opened my menu and took off my leather jacket and sword holder, trying not to feel embarrassed. I opened my inventory and pulled out the super rare ragout rabbit meat. I put it into a cool ceramic pot and set it on the table. Asuna's eyes widened as she picked up the pot and gazed inside with a look of awe. "Wow, this is what a top-of-the-line ingredient looks like," she exclaimed. "So what are we making with it?" I shrugged. "Surprise me, chef's choice." Asuna grinned mischievously. "How about a stew? I mean, it's called ragout rabbit for a reason, right?" She headed into the next room, and I followed her. The kitchen was huge and amazing, with fancy cooking gadgets hanging on the wall near a giant wood-fired oven. Asuna tapped the oven twice, like she was clicking a computer mouse, and a menu suddenly appeared. Asuna started cooking by setting a timer and grabbing a metal pot from the cupboard. She added the meat, some herbs and water, then put a lid on top. "This is way too easy," she said with a frown. "In real life, cooking is so much more complicated and fun, but in the virtual world of SAO, cooking was super simplified." Asuna popped the pot into the oven and hit start. The timer began to count down from 5 minutes. While we waited, Asuna zipped around the kitchen, pulling out ingredients from a magic pantry that seemed to have everything she needed. She moved with ease, arranging dishes like a pro. I watched in amazement. She didn't make a single mistake. Before long, the timer went off, and Asuna presented an amazing feast. We sat down at the table, facing each other, and got ready to dig in. The food looked incredible, and I couldn't wait to taste it. The amazing food in front of me was making my stomach growl. A hot brown stew filled the plate, and the steam rising from it made my nose twitch with excitement. The stew was packed with big chunks of meat, floating in a rich, creamy sauce that looked super tasty. I couldn't wait to dig in. I barely said thanks before grabbing my spoon and scooping up a huge mouthful. It was love at first bite. The flavors exploded in my mouth as I bit into the tender meat, and the juices started dripping out. But here's the thing. Eating in the virtual world of Sword Art Online isn't exactly like eating in real life. It doesn't feel 100% realistic. Still, this stew was so good that I didn't care. It was the best food I'd ever had in the game. Imagine being able to eat your favorite foods without actually taking a bite. That's what Argus discovered with a cool tool called the Taste Recreation Engine. This fancy technology was created by a company that specializes in environmental software. So, how does it work? The engine sends fake signals to your brain that make you think you're eating. It's like a trick for your taste buds. You'll feel like you're tasting, smelling, and even feeling the heat of your favorite foods, but it's all just an illusion. Your body isn't getting any real nutrients from this eating experience. It's just your brain being fooled. It's pretty wild to think about, but Argus didn't have time to dwell on the details. They had to see where this technology would take them. I took a bite of that amazing stew and suddenly nothing else mattered. It was the best meal I'd had since I started playing this game 2 years ago. Asuna and I didn't say a word to each other. We just kept eating until our plates and the pot were spotless. When we finally finished, Asuna let out a happy sigh. "Gosh. I'm glad I'm still alive," she said. I couldn't agree more. I leaned back in my chair, sipping this weird tasting tea, feeling super satisfied. But then I started wondering, did the game's creators make the food taste like real life, or was it just a bunch of computer code that happened to taste good? Asuna and I sat there in silence for a few minutes, enjoying our tea. Then she spoke up, cradling her mug in her hands. "It's weird," she said. "I feel like I've lived here my whole life.